Okay, guys, so we've been taking a look at quadratics. We've taken a look at how to solve for the x-intercepts for a quadratic function by graphing, by using the graphing calculator, and factoring. And today we're going to take a look at something called the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is helpful because it's a method that will work for any kind of quadratic equation. And you may remember back when we started talking about solving quadratics that we could use completing the square to help solve for x. So that's what we're going to do for this one. And so when we do this, we get, remember our first step, we're going to move our plus 2 to the other side and make it minus. And then at this point, I divide everything by 3.
All dancers in the report to the dance room. That's all dancers to the dance room. Thank you.
So when I divide everything by 3, it's going to look like that. And then I complete the square on this part on the left side. So I take half of negative 2, I get negative 1, and I square that, and I get a positive 1. So on this side, I'm going to have x squared minus 2x. So I'm going to add 1 to this side, and I'm going to add 1 to this side. And now I've got a trinomial that I can factor here. And when I factor it, I get x minus 1 squared. And on the other side, if I add negative 2/3 plus 1, so the plus 1 is like 3/3. So when I add those together, I get 1/3. And hopefully you remember when we get to this point, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So when I take the square root of x minus 1 squared, it just gets rid of the squared, so I get x minus 1. And on the other side, I'll have plus or minus the square root of 1/3. So when I get x by itself, I move the minus 1 to the other side. I end up with 1 plus or minus the square root of 1/3. So that means I've got 2 possible answers. X can be equal to 1 plus the square root of 1/3, or x can equal 1 minus the square root of 1/3. So I'll just punch this into the calculator to get the decimal here. So when we punch that into the calculator, we end up with x is equal to 1.58, or x is equal to 0.42. So those are the 2 possible answers that we get when we round to 2 decimal places. Now, that's quite a bit of work involved in completing the square. This formula here is called the quadratic formula. And it will work to solve any quadratic equation. So when the equation is written in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then you can sub those values in. So a is the value that's in front of the x squared. That's the coefficient of x squared. B is the coefficient, or the number that comes in front of x. And c is the constant term that doesn't have an x with it. The one thing you really want to make sure of here is that it's important that the equation's written in standard form with 0 on the other side. That's the only time that the quadratic formula is going to work. And then all we really have to do then is plug the numbers into the formula to figure it out. So we're going to do it for this question here. So first thing we're going to do is we'll make a list of the values for a, b, and c. So you can see the equations on one side equal to 0. So a is the number that's in front of x squared. B is the number that's in front of the x, and C is the constant term that's on the end. So make sure you include the signs with those. And now I'm going to copy down the formula. So x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So it's important that you write all of this stuff underneath the root sign, and that this line goes all the way across here with 2a underneath it. So let's see what happens when we plug things in here. So minus b, when we have this minus b here, that means we're going to change the sign of b. So negative 5 is going to change to positive 5, plus or minus the square root. And this is going to be negative 5 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So notice I'm using brackets around the numbers that I'm subbing in that are affected by things around it, like the squared or when they're multiplying together. So we're going to figure out what we get underneath the root sign here first. So negative 5 squared, negative 5 times negative 5 is going to give us 25. And then here we've got negative 4 times 1 times negative 2. So when we multiply those together, we're going to end up with plus 8. And we need to remember that we don't forget the denominator. 2 times 1 is going to give us 2. So we end up with x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2. And then like we did before, there are 2 possible answers that come from this. So one possible answer is 5 plus the square root of 33 over 2. So we'll start with that one. It's important when you plug this into your calculator that you either put a bracket around that top part before you divide by 2, or you can do 5 plus the square root of 33, hit equals to get the answer in the numerator, and then divide by 2. Okay? Either way, will work here. Okay? And then the other one, the negative in the middle, it's going to be 5 minus root 33 over 2. And same thing, you can punch it in either of those 2 ways. So when we get the decimal for those, so when we get the decimals for that, we get negative 0.37 and we get 5.37. Okay, so we're going to do some practice questions using the quadratic formula tomorrow in class. Yeah, so hope you have a good night. Thanks. Luke, I am your father.